everyone. We're going to kick off with our programme of talks again now. And for those of you who are viewing at home, sorry for the technical issues, but the stream is back online now. And do let us know in the chat if you have any further problems. But please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Elliott McSherry from Ballistic Moon.
Hey folks, hope you're doing well. Thank you for the very lovely welcome. Thanks again to the University of Staffordshire for the invite, and then the Ukie team for helping set this up as well. So I'll just let 1 or 2 seconds go by for folks to walk in, and then we will get started. Right, so my talk today is going to be around about 30 minutes. I'm going to leave about 10 minutes for Q&A. I'll also be at the sort of speaker's desk and just around the event in general for a few hours if you want to talk shop about games industry, environment art, lighting, 3D. That is sort of where my specialism is at. With that being said, cool. So what we're covering today is my journey on sort of re-entering the industry and the lessons I've learned since I've re-entered it. So advice on working remotely, as that is what I currently do. Tips for working on remasters. So we've very recently, the studio I work at has just shipped Until Dawn, the remaster. And there's a lot of remasters in the market coming over the next few years, and that have come out over the last few years as well. So I'll cover like what the difference is on working on those versus a unique IP and the challenges it sort of poses as well. Working in production versus portfolio. So when you work in production, what are some of the skills that you're really going to need to have and develop as you go along? And progression of game art roles. So moving on from the big three in terms of character art, hard surface, and environment art, what are some of the roles that are starting to emerge in the industry more regularly, such as lighting art and so on, and what do they look like? Schedule-wise, 30 minutes, 30 minutes of talk, 10 minutes of Q&A, and then happy to take any questions outside if we run over time as well. So a little bit of myself. So my name's Elliott. My sort of online brand is EMC3D. That's what I go by for social media and YouTube. Currently working in the games industry as a lighting artist, but historically I've worked as a course leader, lecturer, worked at Staffordshire University for about 6 years as an environment art lecturer, and towards the last sort of 3 years of that, course leader for the games art course. And that was about a year and a half ago when I made the shift back into industry. Before that, I worked as an environment artist for various studios as well, and that's dating back to about 2012, after I graduated from university. So I've been in and out of the industry for the last sort of 10 years, mixed with education. I've seen a lot of the changes that sort of brings as well. Yeah, I do guides on YouTube. So this year I launched my YouTube channel where I talk about a lot of environment art and games industry stuff. So if you like the talk today, I have a bunch more talks in that sort of style on the YouTube channel as well. And most of all, we're always learning and progressing. So I'm learning today. I'm talking to you about the things I've learned over the last year and a half re-entering the industry, but I've been in it for over 10 years. So it's just an example that we're always cycling with our learning, whether you're starting off at uni or you're sort of 10 years in as well. So never an excuse to not stop learning. Education-wise, started in Burton College, doing 3D. Had to take a starter course to get onto this. So my GCSEs are pretty much, they're in the letters that I don't even think most people know. They're barely not there. So I had to do a starter course where I had to learn to build computers and learn to write and all that sort of stuff to get onto the college course I wanted to do. So at college, it's 2 years for most people. It was 3 years for me. After that, I did the games course at Burton College and then went to the University of Derby to do a games art program, which was through clearing. I got to thank my mum for that because she pushed me to do that and got in very last minute of the game development course at Derby in around about 2008. After that, worked in industry for a little bit and then hopped back into education at Sheffield to do a master's. So I've kind of gone through the full education spectrum of doing game development sort of stuff up until industry as well. Industry-wise, so the first thing I started working on was something called PlayStation Home, which a lot of people don't know at this stage. It's very old school. It's kind of like Second Life. It was for like a social space for PlayStation. So you'd complete a project every 3 months or so. And we would take games from, like, for example, we did the Uncharted space. So we would get the Uncharted environment art and models from Naughty Dog, and we would optimize them to run on PlayStation Home, because PlayStation Home is quite an old engine compared to a lot of the games that we were porting. So we do that, and there was a nice fast turnover on a lot of the stuff we did. After that, I went into Derby, worked at Eurocom, which at the time was one of the sort of biggest developers in Derby from like the 90s all the way up to when it closed, sadly, in 2012. Worked on a game, James Bond game called 007 Legends, and then a little bit of a break after that because that was when the studio closed, and hopped back into industry around 2014, 2015, working for PlayStation London, which sadly now is closed as well at this stage, working on a VR game. And then I kind of did lose a little bit of my confidence as a games artist and a developer, but I managed to find that actually through teaching. So teaching is a big passion of mine. That's why I do it on the side still to this day. Those 6 years at Staffordshire University are kind of what got me my confidence back, which is why I was able to go back into industry and just go for it. So for me, teaching, helping people learn, but also learning from students as well when they show you cool tricks in lessons and stuff like that, that really got me back into it, and is one of the reasons I was able to go back into industry as a lighting artist, which was June 2023. So it's been about a year and 5 months since a year and 6 months since I left Staffs and re-entered the industry as well. Portfolio-wise, that's my current portfolio. You can feel free to look at it whenever you need to. I've got my Until Dawn stuff on there as well, and some of the speaking stuff I do. So that's who's kind of giving the speech today, so hopefully that you'll get some good value out of this as we cover over the next 30 minutes. So first thing is, I moved to remote working, so it's quite a big change going from Staffordshire University, which is one of the biggest games courses in the world, let alone the UK, and being a sort of a course leader, to going to remotely as a mid-level lighting artist. And working out of sort of a second bedroom as an office. So I want to cover some of the challenges that poses and could pose to you folks when you enter the industry, because there could be a good chance that you work remotely. There are still a lot of studios that offer that alongside hybrid. So I want to cover some of the things I've learned that we've been going over. So a big one is making a difference in your space. So for me, for example, downstairs, that's my sort of gaming PC. I have all my sort of shelves with toys on, all that sort of stuff. I use that for watching movies, just chilling out. But then upstairs in my spare bedroom is another computer, which was sent to me by the studio. 2 monitors, a computer, anything I need to do the job. You can usually request that when you're working remotely. Now, the reason I requested it at the time wasn't because I wanted the differences. I didn't know that at that stage. I actually wanted it because my PC uses a GTX 1080. I can't enable ray tracing in Unreal. I can't put most of the juicy goodies on in Unreal. So it's a bit of a potato, along with the monitors as well. So that's the reason that I requested a PC. And through that, through having a completely different space where I do my professional work, that's really helped me. It really helps. Everything can kind of blend into one if you're on the same computer for every single thing you do. And there's a few ways you can combat that if you are on one computer. But for me, having a separate room that I'm just like, yeah, this is where all the professional stuff goes, the 3D stuff. If it's in a different room, there's absolutely no chance for me to break security protocol in any way because it's always locked to the same computer. So on that computer, I don't use like public Discord. I don't use any social media. I just use the company stuff that is provided and sort of their chat servers. So there's no accident at all that stuff can, be broken. You think, well, does that happen? Yes, it happens a lot, especially with phones as well. When people have the company Slack. Slack is basically it's like a Discord, but a professional version. You can put images in and stuff. That happens a lot, and it can also bring you a bit of difficulty in separating your life and work when you're remote. That's why a lot of people do choose hybrid. But for me, for example, the studio I work for is in Woking, so that is about 4 hours away from me. So there's no chance for me to be hybrid there. There's also no chance for me to move to work there because I currently own a house. So I am locked down in my responsibilities for that. So if you have the chance to work hybrid, it's probably one of the more effective methods. But if not, studios that do offer remote do try and separate where you work professionally and what you do personally. Another one is just find opportunities to go outside. Like this is a big one. So for the first 6 months when I was at Ballistic, But I would just order lunch in all the time, eat it at the desk, and eventually that was quite unhealthy for me overall. And towards my last 6-7 months at Ballistic Moon, every lunch, I live in a village, so I live in Tutbury, which is a nice little village. I go out for a walk in the village, completely decompresses me from the work I'm doing, because you go from working on, 3D and a horror game to working on just walking around the village, and there's a nice chap selling you a sandwich, telling you what's up. So that really helps decompress, but also you can do it in the morning as well. So you can recreate your commute by going for a 20-minute walk, 30-minute walk, and that stuff adds up over time, and it will keep you, it'll give you like a fresh perspective, but it'll also keep you a little bit healthier when you walk around every day. So for me, I walk at this stage about 3 miles a day, which isn't a lot, but it helps as it adds up over time. It's way better than just for me working all day, going downstairs to my personal computer, just working there as well. So it helps break stuff up as well. Best practices. So these are ones that I know of from friends working in other remote studios, but also stuff I've experienced. So one that you think is quite simple is webcams. When you are in your stand-ups, so every studio has a stand-up or a scrum every morning, when you're in team meetings with stakeholders that are your directors or your CEOs, you want to, unless you've got a medical exemption and you've cleared that with HR, which again, absolutely fine, you want to turn on your webcam, because in a lot of cases, it's actually seen as a negative. It's seen as disrespectful if someone is there with a webcam on and you're just an avatar and you're talking back. Me personally, I don't mind that, but I know when you start to deal and communicate with directorial level people, C-suite level folks, your CEOs and your directors, that is actually seen as a negative, and in some cases, that can actually, you can be brought up for it in emails unless you have an exemption. So why haven't you got your webcam on? This is not seen as respectful. For me, it's kind of like a common sense as well. Like, if you go for a job interview and it's remote, you'd want the webcam on both ways, otherwise it gets a little bit awkward. So a simple one that happens quite a lot, and I've seen people get in trouble for. So make sure that you turn your webcam on when you can. Use statuses. So, for example, today I'm off work to give this talk. So my current Slack status will have a palm tree, and it will say, returning on Thursday. Most people on Slack know the palm tree means you're off. Yes, there are systems that will say you're off, but it saves the producer logging in and seeing, oh, is Elliott off today? He's not in the stand-up meeting. He's not in this. Oh, yeah, he's off. He's got his status on. So when you go for lunch, use statuses. With remote working, a lot of studios do have quite a flexible flexi-time approach. So what I mean by that is, as long as you make up your hours of 40 hours a week, there are core hours, which a lot of the time is 10 till 4, and you balance your hours around that. Some people will take a 2-hour lunch. So if you take a 2-hour lunch, just put on your status that you'll be back at a certain time. Go do whatever you need to do. Some people like to break the day up into 2 halves. Some people will go to the gym or just go into the village for 2 hours, and then they'll come back. So there's lots of patterns to remote working, which you may not necessarily be aware of. You don't always have to just have the 1-hour lunch. It really depends on the company policy and what their rules are against it or for it. So I know some people, they will split their day into 2 4-hour slots. Some people will go straight through the day, only take an hour lunch or half an hour lunch. It's quite flexible as long as you're doing the work, I think, and you're communicating. That's the big one. If you're not communicating and we don't know where you are when you're remote, that's going to be seen as a negative over time. You kind of want to over-communicate to a degree if you are remote. So you want to say, these are my check-ins. I'm going to check in once every 2 days, once a day for my work. People know you're there. They know you're working on stuff as well. One is, a lot of my friends do this. Don't put your company Slack on your phone. It's just very risky. So if I have my company Slack on my phone and my phone gets stolen, there's not a great deal of security stopping someone getting into that. Yeah, there might be a password or a fingerprint, but someone can get past that very easily, and then they can get access to a lot of things that they shouldn't really see. So it's also tempting as well. You finish work for the day, you get a ping on your phone, it's 7, 8 p.m. Oh, company message, new update. Oh, that looks cool. But you're checking your phone. Again, you're checking your company stuff. I'm really big for work-life separation. So when you finish work, you finish work. And that means not having the company chat server on your phone. If you have to, get another phone just to have it on and lock it in the drawer. Bring it out to events if you need to, but in most cases, I'd say keep it on the PC that you're working on. And tips for working on remasters. So we as Ballistic Moon have just very recently shipped Until Dawn, the remaster. There's a remaster of the original version, and in general, we're kind of in the almost like the Marvel age of remasters or remakes. Especially a lot of them coming up, like The Witcher is probably still a few years away, right? But this year, I think we've had the Tomb Raider, Silent Hill, Until Dawn, over previous years, Last of Us, and there's a lot more than this to go over every single remake or remaster that's being done currently worldwide. There's a lot. So there's a good chance when you graduate, however long that may be, you will probably be working at some point on a remaster or a remake. So what are some rules about that, and what are some tips? Because it's a little bit different to making your unique IP. There's unique challenges with that. So with remakes and remasters, some will build them from the ground up, and some will sort of polish what's there. So from what I've seen of like the Tomb Raider 1, 2, 3 remaster bundle that came out recently, it's still got the old school graphics, but it looks way nicer and more polished. Whereas you take something like like a Metal Gear Solid or an Until Dawn, it's completely new meshes in a lot of cases, right? So there's different varying levels of when you remaster and when you remake. And I'll share some of my thoughts with that. So firstly, can anyone tell me, like, just look at these 4 thumbnails and someone just shout it out, don't need to see hands. Tell me what type of video is this? What are these videos? What's the context of them? Comparison? Anyone else? You think comparison? Put your hand up if you think these videos are basically comparison videos. Yeah, they're comparison videos, basically. Why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because it reflects the current state of when you release content, either through a trailer or a game, how your audience is going to react as well. Because YouTube, with this sort of stuff, the earlier you get it out, there's more monetarily gain for YouTubers as well. So you're going to get comparisons on YouTube, comparisons from other developers like Digital Foundry that do great technical analysis of games. And you're also going to get those on Reddit, right? So if you have a really passionate fan base for your game, you're going to get somebody on Reddit comparing things and talking about it. But because you're going to get compared, you're in a unique sort of scenario. And you need to prepare to compare. So unlike an original IP, when you work on it, there's nothing really for fans to compare you against in a lot of cases. But when you're on a remake, the first thing that's going to happen when you release a trailer, a screenshot, instantly people are going to go find that screenshot from the original game. They're going to put it side by side. They're going to post it on social media. If you release a trailer, they're going to release a side-by-side because they want to get in on early, review it, get some good audience participation from it. You're always going to be compared with whatever you do. And what it does is it turns your approach to remakes and remasters, in some cases, as every frame a painting. So what I mean by that is when you have a game that has a lot of cinematics in, whether they're pre-rendered or like a Last of Us or something like that, at any point of those cutscenes, you are going to get compared. So it almost turns into like how old school restaurants got judged by Michelin judges. They could come into your restaurant any time of the year, you don't know when, taste your food, see if it's the best quality, come back at another random time. Very similar to this sort of stuff. You have 1,000 cutscenes, you can't slack on any single frame of that because at some point, someone's going to compare a shot you never intended for. It's like, yeah, I'll just work on this shot for half a day. No one's going to see it. It's just a character turning around. Oh, they use the character turning around as a comparison against the original. So you have to be very vigilant on and almost plan for it as a marketing strategy as, yeah, they're going to compare. The stuff we put out really needs to be polished, or what are they going to compare to most likely in a lot of cases. So character close-ups, very popular scenes from games. And it can be both a positive and negative. If you've watched game trailers, not even for remakes, just any game trailer from like the last 3 months of a game coming out, I'm sure you'll spot an error in there, or the audience will spot an error in there that wasn't intended. And yeah, that stuff can happen when you're putting out trailers, because you don't always have control of what goes out in the public. And then the reaction can kind of come in 2 waves, really. So just like there are comparison videos at the start, the second phase to that is the initial reaction. So what's this? Okay, Tomb Raider 1, 2, 3 sucks. Call of Duty Modern Warfare, meh. Good game, disappointing remaster. Silent Hill, do not buy, 3 out of 10. And then you wait a few weeks and you go to something like a Metacritic, and it's not really reflected there. You've got to understand, when you put stuff out, it's like a gold rush to get content out, and they're going to be swayed a lot by their emotions in terms of what they say about your game. So they might love it, they might hate it. You're going to get a mixture. The best thing you can really do is stay the current course, work as best as you can on it, take any feedback from that initial reaction and work it into what you're doing. But it goes to show that, all these scores are very respectable scores for the games we just covered, based on Metacritic, which again, it sort of parses out hundreds of official reviews, but also user reviews, and it doesn't reflect the narrative that may come out right at the start. And that ties into the fact that you're not going to please everybody. No matter what you do, no matter the direction you take it, people are going to love it, they're going to hate it, or they're going to be a mixture of both. They're going to love it in parts and hate it in other parts. And it's just the way it is. And it's the nature of entertainment with any product you put out. And I'd say if you get discouraged by that, just try to build resilience, because at the end of the day, you might be a character artist, a lighting artist, environment artist, a designer, animator. Your job is just to animate and to work on the characters, to work to a wider umbrella of art and game direction. You do the best you can, and whatever happens to the game, happens to the game. You don't want to sit there spamming F5 every night to see the reviews and reading it. It's not healthy for the mind, and you've got to just move on from it and do the best you can as an artist in your position at a company, because a lot of stuff is out of your control in that regard. But as an artist, the overriding priority in all of your work when you work on a remaster is, does it look better? At the end of the day, if you want to cut right to the core of it, does it look better than parity? Parity, for example, is, does it look the same as the original? Which is kind of like the minimum range you want to have. So on every shot, it's not unusual when you're working on a game, you take pictures of everything. You have a massive planning board, reference board. You take pictures as much as you can, and you compare it to the original. And you use that to sort of get a wider picture of how you are in comparison to the original game. Now, it sounds like common sense, but it can sneak up on you. You can sometimes just get into the flow. Like, how many of you work on a project and you get references, and you use references for the first week, then you forget and you're just going by flow and mind? That can happen. You always want to have your reference there. In this case, you want to have your original image from the remaster. So even with a screenshot like with this, objectively, yes, it is much better. But I guarantee you would have somebody that would look at the bottom picture and they would say, you know what? The sofa in the before one, it's got way more character, looks way cooler. Someone would bring that up, even though it's subjective. Everything you put out, someone's always going to say, you know what, I prefer the original, or I prefer this. And it's just one of many hundreds of comments that can happen with a remaster. And like I say, you've got to be resilient, just stay to the course. And when things are overriding in terms of their feedback, let's say everybody hates the couch. Everyone's just on about this single couch. Yeah, you can have a reactive developer to that and bake it into your feedback, but you don't want to base everything off singular feedback that you're going to get for what you're doing. But yeah, it can happen. Sometimes you can blur the line between what is better and what is not. More of a recent one as well, so the Horizon remaster that came out, or is coming out, a bunch of images have come out for that. And again, that is one where the remaster is a lot closer to the original, whereas if you remake something from 20 years ago, objectively, you're going to have a bit of an easier time making it look way better. But even with a game like this, yeah, most of the screenshots look way cooler, especially from cinematics and lighting, but you're still going to have folks that aren't really convinced with it. I say it's just the nature of the remake. And you've got to make your stuff look as good as it can in comparison to the original. And is it that simple? Yeah, just make every shot look better than the original. Simple, right? Well, not really. It's really difficult, especially with games that are super cinematic. So, for example, The Last of Us Part 1 has about 1.5 hours, and I think Part 2 has even more, of just pure cinematics. Pure camera-rendered cinematics in what would be the equivalent of Unreal Sequencer. Every single one of those needs a check. Cinematic design check, animation check, environment check. You notice in a lot of these remasters, the background is different. The set dressing changes, the lighting changes. Now, you imagine all of that 1.5 hours. At any point, you are going to get compared from hundreds of gamers on YouTube. It could be any point of that. You want to make sure as much as you can, which makes it a very difficult task, that when you are laying out your wider color script, maybe you've got every image of this 1.5 cutscene or every 10 frames to not go insane. You want to make sure that you're really doing your due diligence of that when you look at it and say, okay, we're pretty confident that when we put out stuff, it doesn't matter where someone's going to do a comparison. It's probably, there's an 80, 90% chance it's going to be really good. Because like I said, when you've got thousands of shots, the difficulty is maintaining quality. And a lot of that comes from the artist, from the tools, from the tech, and from the scope as well. And that's where the every frame a painting comes in. At minimum, you'll want to be parity. In the worst case scenario, you never really want to have an after image that is worse, right? It's like, oh, here's the remaster, here's the original. Oh, the original just looks way better. That you don't want to do that. You want it to be subjective in a lot of that stuff. Technical depth. So whenever you take a remaster on, you're going to take stuff from an older engine, update it into a newer engine. That brings with it a plethora of issues from folder, naming, conventions, how the editor works fundamentally. If you're making your own project in Unreal, you're making it built for Unreal. But if you take something from, let's say you take something from Unity and you port it all the way over to Unreal, that's going to bring with it some pretty strange errors that factor into the time that you have to develop the remake and work on it. So it's never as simple as just do it. There's always going to be technical errors that you can't account for that you need to fix as a team that will affect the way your visuals look and the game looks as well. I keep saying be resilient. Yeah, just start to build resilience. A good way you can build that up now at university, every time you get feedback for your work, take that with a positive spin on it, because I know feedback can be a bit of a double-edged sword. When you receive it, it's like, oh, I've done this thing, I really like it, or I've got feedback to change it completely, or this isn't working. Be resilient of that, be passionate about what you do, but also separate yourself from the work that you do. It's a difficult skill, it takes time, but if you start doing it with your assignments, once you get in as a junior into industry, you can start going from there as well. It is a skill you build up over time. You're not suddenly going to be able to have the thickest skin receiving feedback. Everyone levels up at a different pace. But if you start now, you'll be good to go in a few years. And working in production. So right now, most of you, unless you do the collaborative module, which will be the closest you get to this, is you're working on portfolio. You're not working on production. So when you work on portfolio, you're working on making something look visually really good, maybe designing something really good. But when you work in production, you're working on a game. So there are things that can affect what you're doing that aren't even in your department. So how do you deal with that? What are the ways you can deal with it? What are some pros and cons when you're suddenly in a team environment where promotions are at stake, layoffs are happening? What are some things you can do to be the most effective worker in a studio? And there's lots of stuff we could cover for this, but here's the things I would take. And again, this is an art focus, right? So I think estimation is big. You're going to get organized by a producer when you work on stuff, but that producer in most cases is going to ask me, for example, hey, Elliott, we've got this scene. It's got no lighting at all. I need you to light it how many days? I need to have a good estimate for that. I know how long it takes now, but starting off, you're going to be off the mark a little bit. And as you gain more tenure in what you do, you're going to learn how much it takes to sculpt a head, how much it takes to bake a character, how much it takes to relight an environment or to make an environment. Estimation's big. You always want to estimate big and then deliver on a smaller scale. So, for example, I might say 4 days and deliver it in 3.5. It's just a common practice which gets you some good grace. Organization and communication, a big one. So if you are remote and you're just super quiet, you're only there when you need to be and you only talk to folks when you need to, you're not engaging in work daily shares, you're only showing stuff when it's the final deadline, that stuff will go against you in the long term. Because when you're remote, you're not in the office, you can't be seen, so you want to have more of a presence there in your studio. So everything from showing before afters, putting in a few messages a day, joining in with the chat. Every chat has its sub-chat of like lighting artist, environment artist, all that sort of stuff. Try and help solve issues. So if you are working on an environment and the lighting is done, but it's really broken in one area, don't just leave it and assume lighting will find it. Fire a message to the lighting artist responsible for the level. Hey, I saw this. It might be getting fixed. I thought I'd let you know. That alone, if you keep doing that over the year, you're going to gain a really good reputation in that when you tackle a task, they're going to trust you to do that task and do your due diligence on it, versus you do the task to the bare minimum, you leave a bunch of technical debt, and then a year later, someone else has to fix it. That happens a lot, and it's very painful. So always do your due diligence. estimate correctly. Don't try and deliver super fast to look good in the eyes of your CEOs. Take the time it legit takes to do something. If it takes 5 days, it takes 5 days. And you can start practicing that now. Every assignment you have, start practicing how long it would take to do 1 or 2 things. So, you know, if you do an environment, how long does it take to do 1 or 2 props? I don't think you're going to estimate how long it takes to do a full character, a full environment, because producers do that in the industry. But what you can do as an artist or a designer, just estimate how long it will take to do a single task and track yourself on that task and see if you met it or not. You'll find out a lot about your working speed as well. So that comes under proactiveness and optimization. I know we're in a world of nanite and lumen and all that sort of stuff, but they're very expensive. Nanite isn't used everywhere, but also lumen is starting to be used in a lot of places, but it brings with it a lot of issues as well. So whether you're targeting 30 or 60 FPS, you can't just go in and throw polygons and throw textures at 8K at everything. You really need to optimize what you're doing to reduce the technical debt you'll incur in the future. You'll learn a bit of that as you go on through university. I also have some content on that as well on YouTube for optimization. And the final part is role progression. So how has game art progressed since I've been in the industry earlier on in the 2012s, through teaching and seeing all the roles to where I am now? So you'll find sheets like this. This is a great sheet from Creative Assembly that goes over a lot of the game art roles on sort of a surface level, shows you like the main roles that are in there, right? I think most people have seen this. If not, you can get it from Creative Assembly's website. If we drill down into the art, there's many things like this that they can't cover everything. They cover the most common roles. So I'd say at university, at least when we were setting up this new course that you folks are on now, we looked at the big 3. Character art, environment art, and hard surface art. Vehicles, weapons, environments, and characters. And then there are little mini modules around that, like lighting, technical, whatever may be that I'm not aware of today. Those big 3 lead into a lot of the niche jobs I'm going to cover in the next few slides. For example, I'm a lighting artist, but I'm a lighting artist with an environment artist sub-skill set. Some can come from VFX. Because I come from environment art, I can spot a lot of environment art errors, a lot of material errors, which I wouldn't have been able to if I wasn't trained as an environment artist. Likewise, you can go from being a character artist to, I've seen people go from character art to concept art, because they have really good life drawing skills as well. And they can do props as well, characters can. So it's not uncommon for them to share on the props as well. So a lot of these big 3 lead into a multitude of niche jobs that are now popping up more and more. They've been there, but they're popping up a lot more. And it's like an RPG. Games now, and as we move forward, lots of specialist roles out there. Specialisms of specialisms of specialisms. You want to have a T-shaped sort of approach to this. So a T-shaped approach is the broad skills, so your core skills, working in a team, maybe having one of those big 3 as your base, and the deep knowledge is the specialism. So for me, my broad skills are I was a lecturer, I was an environment artist, and my deep knowledge now is I'm a lighting artist. So that's where my skills all work together. You want to have something like that as you go along into especially your 3rd year of university or your graduation. So some of the niche roles, this is from a buddy of mine, Aidan. Aidan and Ashley are twins, and they're amazing cinematic artists. So a cinematic artist sets up the cameras, but they also do some lighting. So the way you're seeing Dr. Hill and Josh here, with the camera, the lens, where the characters are on there, you've got to remember this is a remaster. So a lot of the animations may be polished, but a lot of them follow the same as the original, right? So the camera's been framed in a way to get the most juicy looking shot of these characters. So a lot of the time, they'll use like a 50 or a 70 millimeter lens. And you know this, right? Because every cinematic and lighting artist hates working on wide angle shots. You've got 5 people in a shot and it's like a 20 millimeter lens. And we're like, oh no, we've got to light all those characters. It's going to be a nightmare. And you get something like this, which is like a telephoto. It's like, oh yeah, let's do some really nice 4-point lighting, 3-point lighting. And they look great and juicy. You'll notice when you look at portfolios of people that have worked on cinematics, most of the shots are telephoto. They don't tend to put the wide-angle shots in there because wide-angle shots are just a bit more tougher to make look good, and they serve more of a purpose of seeing a character in a wider environment. So cinematic artists set up the camera, the cinematic design of the camera, how it moves, and then they also do some lighting on a cinematic level. For characters, again, this role is quite popular now, groom, so groom artist. A lot of the time you'll be at a studio that offers a character art service of doing hair and fur for studios, so they'll inject into somewhere and provide that service. A lot of this is using stuff like XGen and whatever the newest tools are, and you provide purely hair solutions for games. very common role. Actually, I do find like most character artists starting out usually go into groom when they're starting up. Technical lighting. I'm a lighting artist, and my technical knowledge, I'd say, is decent, but it's nowhere near this. When you're a technical lighting artist, you grind it to level 99 in an MMO, right? You are coding, Python, Lua, maybe a bit of C++, lots of blueprint. You make tools for the lighting team and the art team. So a lot of the tools here are just buttons to make life easier, because Unreal does throw a lot of stuff at you. And instead of disabling it manually, you can do it through buttons. Also providing what we call, these multicolored images here are gradient maps. So they tell you when a texture is too dark, too light, which is big in PBR, because one of the big things about lighting is it's also driven by the materials done by environment art and character art. So if you have a material, an albedo that's too dark, lighting will suffer. If it's too bright, lighting will suffer. Everything's based off values. So technical make a lot of this to really solve your values in that case. Integration, it's hard to get images of integration, because integration art is basically you provide briefs to send to outsourced studios, you give them feedback. A lot of studios outsource now. All the work that comes in from an outsourced studio has to be reviewed at a center point before it makes it into the game to retain quality. That's what an integration artist does as well. And as I said, more roles. I'm a lighting artist, which is niche, cinematic lighting, foliage artist, biome artist, art manager, more management route, geology, doing rocks for games, materials artist, just doing purely materials for games, and marketing artist, where you focus on lighting, environment art, all that sort of stuff to put out marketing images for the studio. Having said, a recap of what I spoke about, and I don't know what time I'm at. I'm terrible at math, so however long I have left. 4 minutes. So I will definitely be at the speaker booth talking, but if there's any questions you want to fit in 4 minutes, please do ask away and put your hand up. If not, I will be outside if you want to talk more privately, and we can discuss anything games art, games industry related. Cool. Right, yeah, feel free to come chat to me in the main room. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope that added value. And thanks very much, folks.